Let me start with this truth right here. Every open door is not a God door. And every person who walks with you is not meant to stay with you. Some people come into your life for a season, some for a reason, and only a few for a lifetime. And if you're wondering why certain relationships feel heavy, confusing, or draining, it may be because God is getting ready to do some divine house cleaning. Don't panic when people leave. Sometimes that's not loss. That's leadership from heaven. Not everyone who walks into your life is assigned to walk with you forever. And that truth can be both freeing and challenging. Here's the hook you need to hear. Shared history does not equal shared destiny. Some people are connected to your beginning, not your future. God allows relationships to form for specific seasons. And when the purpose of that season is fulfilled, the relationship may no longer fit. That does not make the connection meaningless. It simply means it has completed its assignment. Holding on to people beyond their season can create unnecessary confusion, frustration, and spiritual stagnation. God is intentional about alignment, and alignment always matters more than familiarity. Just because someone understands your past does not mean they can support your growth. Some people are comfortable with the version of you that needed them, but uncomfortable with the version of you that no longer does. When growth begins, tension often follows, because growth exposes differences in vision, values, and direction. That's when God begins to separate, not out of anger, but out of order. He knows that destiny requires the right environment. An environment includes people. Here's another truth that grabs your attention. God will never let loyalty to people sabotage obedience to Him. When relationships start pulling you away from your calling, dulling your spiritual sensitivity, or normalizing compromise, God intervenes. He may do it quietly, through distance or silence, or suddenly, through conflict or change. Either way, the separation is purposeful. God is not reacting to emotions. He is responding to destiny. It's important to understand that seasons change because people grow or refuse to. Some relationships expire not because of betrayal, but because of direction. You're moving forward, and they're standing still. And God, who sees the end from the beginning, knows that carrying the wrong people into your next season will slow you down, weigh you down, or water you down. So He steps in and does what love sometimes requires. He limits access. If you find yourself questioning why certain people are fading from your life, consider this hook. God is editing your circle to protect your calling. What feels like loss may actually be preparation. What feels like isolation may be intentional focus. God assigns people to your journey, but He alone decides how long the assignment lasts. When He changes the cast, it's because the story is moving into a new chapter. God never removes people randomly. He removes with purpose, precision, and protection in mind. Here's the hook that shifts your perspective. What God allows to stay can shape you, but what God removes can save you. When a relationship begins to interfere with your calling, your character, or your conviction, God pays attention. He is far more invested in your destiny than in your comfort. And He will not allow anything to quietly undermine what He designed you to become. Wrong people don't always look wrong at first. Sometimes they are familiar voices, trusted influences, or comfortable connections. But over time, their presence begins to weaken your spiritual focus. They normalize compromise, question your obedience, or subtly pull you away from God's direction. That's when God steps in. Here's the hook you need to hear clearly. God will interrupt relationships that interrupt His will. He refuses to bless you while something around you is draining the very purpose He placed within you. God understands influence better than we do. He knows that the people closest to you have the loudest voice in your life. When that voice starts drowning out His voice, separation becomes necessary. This isn't about punishment. It's about preservation. God protects your future by removing what threatens it in the present. He sees conversations you don't recognize as dangerous, attitudes you've grown accustomed to, and patterns that feel normal but are slowly redirecting your life. So He intervenes before damage becomes destiny. Another truth that demands attention is this: God will not elevate you while toxic influence has access to you. New levels require new discipline. And discipline includes relational boundaries. Some people cannot go where God is taking you because they don't have the faith, maturity, or commitment required for that level. Keeping them close would force you to choose between pleasing people and obeying God, and God will never put you in a position where disobedience feels necessary for connection. When God removes someone, it may feel abrupt or confusing, but it is never careless. He is clearing space for growth, clarity, and stronger alignment. What looks like loss is often leadership from heaven. God removes the wrong people not because He is taking something from you, but because He is guarding something ahead of you. And if God had to step in, it's because what stayed too long could have cost you too much. What feels like separation is often misunderstood as punishment. But here's the hook that reframes everything. Not every goodbye is rejection. Some goodbyes are rescue. When God allows distance between you and certain people, it is rarely about what you did wrong. It is often about what He is protecting you from. We tend to measure relationships by emotional attachment, but God measures them by spiritual impact. If someone's presence consistently creates confusion, pressure, or compromise, protection requires separation. God sees what you cannot see. He understands trajectories, consequences, and long-term effects long before they show up in visible ways. A relationship may feel safe because it's familiar, but familiarity can hide danger. Here's the truth that demands attention. Comfort is not the same as covering. Just because someone makes you feel accepted does not mean they are helping you become who God designed you to be. God will never sacrifice your future to preserve your comfort. Protection often feels painful because it disrupts what you've grown used to. When God removes someone, the silence, distance, or loss can feel personal, even unfair. But here's the hook that changes the narrative. God protects you in ways that don't always feel good, but always work for good. He may be shielding you from influences that weaken your faith, environments that limit your growth, or conversations that slowly pull you off course. What feels harsh in the moment may be mercy in disguise. Many times, separation happens before damage becomes visible. God intervenes early because he knows how easily influence spreads. The wrong relationship doesn't have to destroy you overnight. It only has to delay you long enough to weaken your momentum. God steps in because he refuses to let small compromises grow into permanent consequences. Protection doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like distance, unanswered calls, or paths quietly drifting apart. Here's another hook worth holding on to. God removes what you are emotionally attached to if it threatens what you are spiritually assigned to. He understands how hard it is to let go, which is why he often does the separating himself, not to wound you, but to guard you, not to isolate you, but to realign you. If God allowed the separation, it's because staying connected would have cost you more than you were willing to admit. Protection is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself or explain itself. It simply redirects. And when you look back with clarity, you often realize that what felt like loss was actually God stepping between you and something that could have altered your purpose, delayed your calling, or diminished your peace. Growth always demands change. And here's the hook that challenges comfort. You cannot step into a new level while dragging old attachments that no longer fit. Every season of growth comes with increased responsibility, sharper vision, and greater discipline. But growth becomes difficult when you are surrounded by people who are anchored to who you used to be. God never upgrades your purpose without also adjusting your environment. And people are a major part of that environment. As you grow, your priorities shift. What once entertained you may no longer satisfy you. What once felt acceptable may now feel heavy. And when that happens, tension begins to surface in relationships. Here's the truth many avoid. Some people don't resist you. They resist your growth. They are comfortable with your old limits because your growth exposes their unwillingness to change. God sees that remaining connected to those patterns will slow you down. So he begins to loosen the ties. Growth requires alignment, not attachment. You can love people and still outgrow the space they occupy in your life. The problem comes when emotional loyalty overrides spiritual discernment. Here's a hook worth holding on to. You cannot become who God is calling you to be while constantly explaining yourself to people committed to your past. Growth needs freedom, and freedom requires letting go of relationships that no longer support forward movement. Old connections often carry old mindsets. They may encourage hesitation when God is calling for boldness, or comfort when God is calling for courage. Over time, their influence can quietly limit your potential. God knows that progress cannot thrive in environments that resist change. That's why He creates distance, not to punish you, but to protect your momentum. Growth thrives where faith is supported, vision is encouraged, and discipline is respected. Another truth that deserves attention is this: every new level requires a lighter load. You cannot carry outdated expectations, unhealthy dynamics, and misaligned relationships into a season that demands focus and strength. God understands that growth already requires sacrifice, so He removes unnecessary weight. What feels like separation is often preparation for increased responsibility. When God begins to elevate you, clarity becomes essential. Distractions that once felt small begin to matter more. Conversations that once felt harmless begin to feel draining. That awareness is not arrogance, it is maturity. God sharpens your discernment because growth demands intentional choices. And sometimes the most intentional choice is allowing distance where familiarity once lived. Growth is not betrayal. Change is not rejection. And letting go is not failure. It is alignment. God never calls you forward without making sure you are free enough to move. And if certain connections cannot move with you, it's because they were never meant to define where you are going next. One of the hardest disciplines in life is learning when not to pursue what feels familiar. And here's the hook that confronts the heart. If God released it, chasing it can delay you. Many people struggle not because they lost something, but because they keep running after what God already let go. When God closes a door, it is never accidental, emotional, or impulsive. It is intentional, informed, and protective. Reopening what God shut often reintroduces confusion, pain, and compromise into a season that was meant for clarity and growth. Chasing released relationships usually comes from attachment, not alignment. Emotions can make us romanticize what once was while ignoring why God allowed it to end. Here's the truth that demands honesty. What you miss emotionally may no longer be healthy spiritually. God sees what you overlook. Patterns that weaken your resolve, conversations that pull you backward, and influences that quietly erode your confidence and faith. When He removes someone, it's not because He forgot how much they mattered to you. It's because He knows how much they could cost you. Obedience becomes difficult when memories are louder than discernment. The temptation is to revisit, reconnect, and re-explain, hoping things will change. But here's the hook you need to hear clearly. Obedience means trusting God's decision even when your feelings disagree. Chasing what God released often puts you in a cycle of frustration because you are asking something old to function in a new season. God does not anoint what He has already closed. There is also a hidden danger in pursuit. It shifts your focus. Instead of moving forward, you begin negotiating with the past. Instead of building what's next, you're trying to repair what's over. God understands that divided focus weakens progress. That's why He calls you to let go fully, not partially. Partial obedience keeps emotional doors open that God closed for a reason. Another hook worth holding on to is this: what God removes loses its authority the moment you stop chasing it. Peace often returns not when things come back, but when you finally release the need for them too. Letting go is not giving up. It is giving control back to God. It is saying, I trust your wisdom more than my attachment. God's direction always leads forward, never backward. When you stop chasing what God released, you free your hands to receive what He is preparing. And what God prepares always fits the season He is taking you into. God never removes without intention. And here's the hook that restores hope. When God takes something out of your life, He is not emptying you. He is positioning you. Many people fear loss because they assume removal means abandonment. But God does not operate in subtraction without purpose. He clears space before He fills it. He creates room before He brings replacement. What looks like emptiness is often preparation for alignment. God understands capacity. He knows that you cannot receive what's next if your hands are still holding what no longer fits. Some relationships take up emotional space, mental energy, and spiritual focus that God intends to redirect. Here's the truth that shifts perspective. God replaces what He removes with what you actually need, not just what you want. The replacement may not arrive immediately, but it always arrives intentionally. Replacement does not always mean another person right away. Sometimes God replaces noise with peace, confusion with clarity, and pressure with purpose. Sometimes He replaces dependence on people with deeper dependence on Him. That season of quiet is not absence. It is alignment. Here's a hook worth holding on to. God often replaces relationships with strength before He replaces them with people. He builds you so you don't repeat the same cycles. When the right people do arrive, they don't drain you. They sharpen you. They don't compete with your calling. They confirm it. God's replacements bring peace instead of pressure, encouragement instead of confusion, and growth instead of guilt. That's because God never restores you to what broke you. He redirects you to what builds you. Replacement is not about filling a void. It's about elevating your environment. God also replaces loss with perspective. You begin to see why certain people could not stay, why certain connections had limits, and why separation was necessary. Here's another hook. What once felt like rejection starts to look like rescue when the right people show up. God's replacements don't require you to shrink, explain, or compromise who you are becoming. Replacement operates on God's timing, not emotional urgency. Rushing the process can lead you to accept substitutes instead of God's best. God is not interested in quick fixes. He is committed to lasting fruit. When he replaces, he does it thoroughly. He replaces instability with consistency, fear with confidence, and isolation with meaningful connection. What God brings next will always match where he is taking you. It will support your growth, respect your boundaries, and align with your purpose. And when you look back, you'll realize that God didn't just remove the wrong people. He made room for the right future. So if God is removing people from your life right now, don't fight it, trust it. Lift your hands and say, Lord, align my relationships with my destiny. Because when God removes the wrong people, he makes room for the right ones. And when the right people show up, purpose flows, peace increases, and progress accelerates. Let God do the separating, because whatever he removes, he replaces with something better. Stay faithful, stay focused, and keep moving forward. God knows exactly what he's doing.